Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Downtown Action Committee meeting, December 11th, 2019. The time is 9:01 a.m. Ms. Hope, can I have a call of order, roll call, please?
Roger Jansen. Let the record reflect that Roger Jansen is not present. Nick Mihilich.
Here.
Brian Shagos.
Present.
Stephen Graham.
Present.
Michael Cuevas.
Present.
David Felton.
Present.
Brad McPherson.
Present.
Okay. Next is the approval of minutes from the November 13th, 2019 meeting. Is there any comment on that?
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
Hearing a motion and a second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Minutes pass. Next is report from the city urban designer, Ms. Aponte.
Good morning, Ana Maria Aponte, City Urban Designer. The only thing that I have to mention today is for the meeting today, we have two cases. Our chair is not present today, so Mr. Mihalik will be as vice chair running the meeting, but he has suggested he's going to recuse himself from the case number 1908. So the board needs to elect or appoint a chair pro term for the meeting that will run the meeting at the time Mr. Mihalik steps down. So you can do that now, or you can do that when we are ready to proceed with the 1908 case.
I think we'll do it now to get it done and set.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to nominate Stephen Graham as the pro temp chair for item 1908.
Second.
Thank you for the motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Pro tem
Okay.
passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I have for today.
Okay, thank you. Next is declaration of ex parte communications. For those of you that have had ex parte communications, maybe we can just start at one end, work our way down.
Sure, I'll go first. I've had an ex parte communication with Rebecca Miller of Miller Permitting and Land Development and with Jason Kraus of Zom Living, explaining the nature of the project that's going to come before us. I believe agenda item number 1. Those communications did not in any way and will not impact my ability to make a decision today.
Thank you.
I haven't had ex parte communication with anyone on any of the items on the agenda. However, I will be recusing myself from items number 1 and 2 on the agenda. I have a conflict. My wife does consulting work for Insight Studio, who are representing DAC case 19-11, the first agenda item, but just out of clarity, given that the second case relates to the same development, I'm going to recuse myself from the second case as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I've had ex parte communications on items 1911 and 1907 with Mr. Kraus and Ms. Miller. And on item 1908, I've had ex parte communications with Mr. Rathlev and Mr. Oyer. Those meetings will not influence my decision here today.
Thank you. I have had ex parte communications with Rebecca Miller of Miller Land Development regarding case 19-11 and case 1907-07, and those communications will not have any impact on my decision on the vote.
I have had ex parte communications with Harvey Oyer from Schutz and Bowen and Jordan Ratliff from Related, and also participated in a city-initiated public meeting for our Downtown Neighborhood Association, which we had city staff present. And that being said, I will make my decision today based upon the evidence that is presented.
I have not had any ex parte communications.
Thank you. Next is the public hearing swearing in of speakers.
Anyone who'd like to speak on any item on today's agenda, please rise and be sworn in. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're going to give today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
And I do have several comment cards up here, and just check in when the right time is for those public comments in the order to be
You can do that when you open the meeting to public comment after the applicant has presented.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Brian Terry. I'm with Insight Studio. It's a pleasure to be here this morning to be introducing this project to you, 401 Datura. We have a big group of folks here on behalf of our application. Representatives from ZOM Senior Living are here. We have Chris Hagan from Kimley Horn, Traffic Engineering, Ellie Zacharias from DMBB, our land use attorneys here. We have Alexia, who is with MSA, and Hugh from AAL. And I want to introduce them as we go through this process and this presentation. If you guys have questions, I want to make sure that we have everybody here so can hopefully make any clarifications as necessary. So again, we are excited to be here. This is the first of its kind really in the downtown area, bringing a luxury senior living facility on Datura Street, just behind Clematis. We have a variety of applications that we are going to be reviewing with you today, starting with the Class B conditional use or special use for the Type 3 group home. We do have a few variances that are associated with this. There are a couple other facilities, although I would say not similar to ours. However, they are considered Type 3 homes that we're going to have require a variance from the separation criteria. And then a couple of active use liner variances for the second and third floor, as well as a garage setback. So I've got a lot of detail to go through, so bear with me. I'll try to move through as quickly as possible. Real quickly, introduction to whom ZOM is. ZOM is a national multifamily builder. They do have multiple projects here in Palm Beach County. One in the city of West Palm Beach, kind of western Palm Beach, or out western on Okeechobee Boulevard. Also doing work in Boca Raton, Palm Beach Gardens, Delray Beach. They're just breaking ground on a new senior facility in Wellington as well. Have won multiple awards as being a top builder, as well as some green building initiatives that they have within their corporation. They are a large group. They do work nationally. But home base is right here in Fort Lauderdale, not West Palm, but just down the road, obviously a local Florida developer. Again, so they have 56 multifamily projects nationwide, 43 of those are in Florida. And the senior market is a new venture. This is something that they've really kind of dove into. They're using their skills and their assets, being luxury multifamily, rolling that into the senior market, which is obviously a growing and an exploding business format or opportunity in urban areas. They are partnering with an operator, Watermark. Watermark will be operating the facility, and they have multiple, 6 total in Florida that they're currently operating. So to get to the application at hand, we have basically 1.25 acres. It's just basically right across the street here from Clematis. Behind Field of Greens, behind the brand new CVS that's been reconstructed. It's the existing parking lot. So just to familiarize everybody with, I've got some quick photographs so you can see. This is kind of the primary entrance. This is if you just pass, if you're going down Dixie, right, and you just pass the CVS, this is one of the main entrance points into that parking structure. This is the alley that runs behind the CVS. This is important. This is a component of this project that's going to be significantly improved. Right now, it's a one-way alley that goes to the west. This is going to get modified into a two-way directional alley, as well as where these cars are parked right here immediately to the left. We are going to be providing some public parking spaces in that location for convenience for people trying to get in and out of CVS, maybe pick up something very quickly. This is at Dixie and Datura. This intersection obviously is kind of one of our major corners that is going to be improved as part of this application. And then this is the view from Quadrille. This is kind of a little bit more of a unique side of the property. Obviously, you've got the Bright Line station on the opposite side of the roadway. This is much less pedestrian oriented, much more vehicular oriented on this side. And this is the side that we're going to be talking to you related to a couple of the variances. Very quickly, this is within the Clematis Waterfront District. This is 10, and you can see in red is our property that is just south of Clematis. But to get to the meat of this application, really, this is kind of a representation of the overall site plan itself. again, the building is sitting kind of pushed up to the northwest corner of the overall property, trying to expand and create a very nice pedestrian plaza, which would just be, if I can get this is essentially the location of the CVS. So you're coming down Dixie. So this large pedestrian plaza is kind of anchoring the property on Dixie Highway. And then it is mirroring very much a lot of the open space that's on the Broadstone, which is then just south of this site. I'm going to show you multiple different elevations and some perspective views. We do have, again, representatives from MSA who can speak specifically to the architecture if you have questions related to it. But you can see this is overall, this is an 8-story building. This is well below the height limitations within this district. But it's very appropriately sized. It's very similar to the scale of the Broadstone next door. You can see using much more modern kind of architectural theme, colors, materials that are going to give it I think a unique presence along Dixie corridor, and as well as the views that you would see it from Quadrille. This is the view that you would see from Dixie Highway. So again, this is the narrow side of our building, so envisioning the pedestrian plaza space that would be directly in front of that. Our primary entrance, I'm going to go back one second. This area right here is where the primary entrance is into the building, and that's on Datura Street. So you can see as you come to this side, this elevation, which is on Dixie, there's dining space that's associated with the overall project. Again, this isn't a senior living center. It's going to have independent living, assisted living, and memory care within it. There's multiple dining facilities within this. This would be one of their premier dining components. It is going to be available to obviously all the residents and their guests, and have some dining component that is facing and activating the Dixie frontage. Now I'm going to flip over to the Quadrille side. This is the side that, again, I mentioned is slightly different from a standpoint of on the second and third floors is where we're going to be talking about the active use component. You can tell that you can't tell that it's not activated by looking at this elevation, but it's really, the parking structure is hidden, tucked in behind that component, behind that elevation. And then this is the elevation that faces Clematis, or really faces the alley. It doesn't actually face Clematis, obviously. The buildings, the CVS, the Field of Greens, that entire strip, the 400 block of Clematis, is directly in front of this. So you can see there's some service area accesses that are occurring on the side of the building. And I'm going to get into one more component of that as we go along. So again, just a massing scale so everybody can see this building in scale to compare to the Broadstone that's directly adjacent to it. It's very similar scale, very similar massing, but there's a lot of movement within the building architecture. Obviously, that's a function of the type of facility it is, and how the units are dispersed within the floor plans. So getting back to what is the program of this building, we have 154 total units. What's, again, unique about this is you're going to have 100 independent living units, and these are going to be obviously age restricted. They're very specific to, I think, bringing and providing opportunities for seniors who live in the urban area, who live in the downtown area, who want to have an opportunity to move in, to transition into this type of housing without having to go out to the suburbs. It's something that this city lacks, is this opportunity. So this is the first project that we think will really fit the need of a significant market. As a transition from those independent living units, there are 34 assisted living units that will be provided within the building, as well as an additional 20 memory care. So again, the building is somewhat structured internally to separate those uses, the independent component versus the memory care versus the assisted living. So it's not all just simply integrated together. There's very clear separation of those housing types. This is a diagram of the open space. So we've got a variety of different open spaces here, obviously public, private components. What you can see is it's distributed amongst really 3 different levels here. On the ground level is that pedestrian plaza space that is primarily fronting Dixie. The public versus the private Then you have the memory on the second floor. We have a private open space, which is specific to the memory care, so you can start to see how the building operates in the sense that the memory care units are gathered together on the second floor, centered around the memory care garden. And then as you move to the the fifth floor, this is the independent living private open space. This is your pool deck and amenity deck that is going to be on the fifth floor, specific to the independent living component. So this is, again, the pedestrian garden. We went through multiple iterations of this from a design perspective, looking at different options of what we wanted this to ultimately to be. Staff worked with us very closely on this, and I think ultimately the design is what is a wonderful opportunity to create what really feels like a true garden, rather than maybe a open, uninviting space. So this is the design component to here, and again, Hugh with a AAL, the Landscape Architects of Record for the project, can speak to any details that or questions that you have related to that. The fifth floor, this is the pool deck component. Again, this is more specific to the independent living side of the project. It'll be a pool deck, it'll be a grill deck, it'll have obviously some outdoor seating, a wonderful amenity, very consistent with what you would see in any high-end residential building in the downtown area. And then for the memory care component, again, this is the memory garden. This is their open space that will service those 20 memory care units, completely confined, completely safe. So here's a perspective of the pedestrian garden from Dixie Highway. Again, looking towards, so we're looking kind of to the southwest in this view. You would have just passed CVS to get to this perspective. You can see the outdoor dining areas that are occurring tucked here underneath the cover of the building that are associated with the dining facility that's with the project. One of the unique characteristics of this existing site is a concrete structure that has been identified, or the request has been made that we try to incorporate this into our project in some form or fashion. It's been a bit of a challenge. We're certainly willing to try to accommodate for that request, and if you take a look at what this perspective is doing, we're showing that we could potentially relocate this canopy in a location where we're providing for the 5 public parking spaces that will be along the alley adjacent to the CVS. This is our first. This is probably about the only location we think that we can stand it up and actually use it as a cover. As you know, the open space criteria says it has to be open to the sky. There's multiple issues with us actually trying to place it anywhere else on the property. And I'm not sure that this, quite frankly, is going to work either. We want to continue to talk that through with the engineering department because it is over public parking spaces. How does that work for people trying to get in and out of their cars? This is probably going to be short-term parking, metered parking. So I think we need to work through this still a little bit, but we wanted to show you at least the effort that we think this is probably the most logical location if we do provide it on site. We would still like to have the opportunity to continue that conversation if there's a better place that the city would prefer it to be, and another park space, another urban area that we could pick it up and move it. We're certainly willing to do that as well. FAR, which another application that's coming in front of you after ours is the request for the TDRs. We are requesting a FAR bonus or purchase through the TDRs, so we're asking for $27,125. I'll let that presentation stand on its own. As far as parking, this is actually a big part of this project. For the uses that were proposed, again, although they're senior, we didn't request a reduction in parking. There is an opportunity within the city's code to request a reduction. We didn't do that. We stuck with what the kind of code standard requirements were for each of those types of uses. So we're required to put 125 on our property. What we're actually doing is we're providing more than that. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the restrictive covenant that has been that was placed on this property when it originally sold it back, I believe it was in 2004. There was a restrictive covenant that required that there be a pharmacy, that there be 50 public parking spaces, and a couple of other items That was just amended by the City Commission on the 2nd of December. So that revision has been made, and the negotiated position was that we would be providing 31 public parking spaces on our property. So we are providing those. We've got 26 that are going to be within the parking structure itself. 5 of them are the ones I keep talking about that are going to be on the street level behind the alley. That will be provide quick access to Clematis Street. So we have those spaces really, and kind of this is a unique component of this application too. One of the reason for the reduction from 50 to 31 is really due to the fact that what we're doing is we're housing the city's trash, which is for that 400 block Clematis. If you drive down that alley, there's 2 or 3 large compactors that are sitting out there. It's not the most attractive thing in the world. We're able to accommodate with that within the building. We're putting in, basically garage doors that will be card accessed by the businesses on Clematis, and we're housing that. It's air conditioned. It's going to be maintained by this development. So that is the offset and the trade-off from 50 to 31. Back to the ground level very quickly here. So what is in yellow is the location of that trash room. Here are the 5 public parking spaces that will be accessible for Clematis. We're still maintaining 2 parallel spaces on Dixie. We've got 1 parallel space on the east side of our drop-off, and then a continuation of the parallel spaces as you move towards Quadrille. One major component of this is having the drop-off. This is extremely important to us. Every car will be valet parked. There is not, although there's public access or for public parking spaces within the garage, they will still be valeted. That's a unique situation because we're not trying to overbuild our parking, and we're using a lot of tandem parking spaces to minimize the scale of the parking structure necessary. So the entire structure is going to be valet parked. Therefore, the drop-off is very important for us to make sure that it's adequate in size, as well as has the best approach and view. This is obviously the front door to our building. We want to make a significant presence here. So you can see this is the view of how that entrance component works. This is a modification to this originally, and one of the conditions that you have says that we needed to reduce our canopy width down from, I believe it was 33 feet down to 22, which is what this revision was made last night, so that we could show you guys what the final product would look like with the revised canopy width. Speaking to the valet, again, Chris Hagan is here with Kimley Horn. He can speak to this if you have additional questions, but this is the anticipated traffic flow for our valet. Again, you'll be dropping off in Datura, you'll be going west to Quadrille, you'll be coming around to the alley. That's why we had to reverse or expand the width of the alley as part of this project, so that we can make sure it has 2-way traffic, so that the valet would not have to be going to Clematis, creating traffic on Clematis to turn around and get to the alley. So we've made that modification to the alley to make sure that you can get access, and our valet can access into the parking structure. Another component to this is the bus stop. I'll hit on this very briefly. We've been talking with Palm Tran, and I want to thank city staff for helping me with this. We've been trying to work with them to get them to relocate over to the Broadstone. This is the existing bus stop that is sitting on Quadrille. This is the bus stop that was built for Broadstone, but hasn't ever been used. So with this, with the city's help, we've been able to get Palm Tran to agree to move to the structure that's on Broadstone, which will allow us to remove the one that's on our property. Again, so very quickly, I'm going to try to hit on some of the application components here. The Type 3 home, obviously this is the definition of what a Type 3 home. We clearly are that. Staff does recommend approval of the Class B special use. Our first variance related to that is the fact that there are 2 other facilities that are within proximity to our site. Again, we think we're very unique in this circumstance. We're going to be a different type of senior housing provided within the city context, but they still meet the definition of group home. So we are requesting a variance from that criteria. Again, staff is recommending approval of that variance. The active use liner, this is probably these are our two largest variances that we're requesting. And again, it has to do with our frontage on Datura as well as our frontage on Quadrille when we're talking about the second and third stories. Staff is recommending approval of both of these. And so what happens is, just to give you a layout of the floor plan itself, how this parking structure works, it's obviously pushed to the west side of our property. And it's consolidated in as tight of a footprint as we can possibly make it. And so this is the second floor. So the first floor has active uses that are associated with the facility itself. There's no parking on the bottom floor. So the entire perimeter, Quadrille, Datura, and Dixie all meet the active use requirement. When you move to the second floor, this is where we have the concern. The parking structure does extend to basically the building wall for both Datura and Quadrille on both the second and third floors. However, to mitigate any of those impacts, MSA has done, I think, a terrific job of working through the architectural design, building it into the overall facade of the building so that it's just simply not visible. It feels very residential, it feels very activated, it feels very consistent with the rest of the building itself. So this is a perspective, again, if you're standing kind of on the corner, you're looking across from the train station, this is really the view that you'd be looking towards. Again, and this is sort of a closer up look of what Quadrille, from the Quadrille side. You can see that there's going to be metal screening that's going to be used in the open areas of the parking structure to give it that aesthetic and residential feel. The next portion of our application has to do with the parking structure setback. So once you're building a parking structure, once you get above the third floor, you're supposed to tier it back a certain dimension. It's been tiered, but it's not quite tiered quite as far as it should by code. Staff is recommending approval of this as well. It has significant impacts on the effectiveness of the parking structure. This is a small site. Again, we're not looking to try to build multiple extra stories of parking if it's not really necessary. In this condition, you can see if we were to set that back, we would lose a significant number of parking spaces. We're trying to accommodate and provide for as many public parking spaces within the structure as possible. And so having that additional burden on top of this project, we are requesting the variance specific to the setback for the parking structure component on the fourth floor on both Quadrille and Datura. So that gets me really to the very end of my presentation. These are the recommendations. We're good with the recommendations. With number D and E, I do have two comments to make. I think D is just a wording issue. I think I've clarified that. I've spoken with Elizabeth related to what the intention there was. Again, this just has to do with the the Palm Tram bus stop. That simply means there's an improvement that they've requested we do. We put some screening on the back of the bus stop. We have a detail actually in our plan set that shows what we would do. If the city would prefer, we'll pay them in lieu of actually doing the work. Whatever is best suited, we just wanted to have that option within the condition. And then E is a specific issue that, again, we can talk through as well. It says the applicant shall relocate the existing traffic light pole box into a landscape area and screen all other utilities on site. We certainly have no problem with screening and our utilities and dealing with the traffic. There's a traffic control box that's on the corner of Dixie and Datura. This condition just says we shall relocate it. What we would prefer it say is that we will relocate or we'll incorporate it within the landscape architecture or the architectural design of that plaza space. We don't know what's ultimate, we don't fully understand the complications that could occur with having to relocate that box. We want to have the opportunity to have an option, if it makes sense, that it be designed into the plaza space and incorporated if it's not a pedestrian impact, if it's not right in the middle of our space. We just want to have that option. We're going to work with staff, we'll work with the design. If it has to be relocated and that's the only solution we have, we understand that, but we need to have some flexibility in the conditions so that it's not a shall relocate and that be our only option. So with that, I apologize. I know I just went through a lot of information very quickly, but I'm happy to answer any question. Our entire team's happy to answer any questions. and we were looking really forward to have an opportunity to submit for permit and get this thing underway. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Terry. Now we'll hear from staff.
Elizabeth Levesque, Urban Design Planner. So I won't be repeating much of what Mr. Terry said. One thing I wanted to go into before I start going into staff's review of the different standards is currently there's a code amendment undergoing for to allow permitting required private open space percentage on the ground level street frontage to be treated as public open space. Now that was brought to DAC, which recommended approval on November 13th. Planning Board also recommended approval for this on November 19th, but it has not gone to commission yet. So this project is utilizing that. In the case that this code amendment does not carry through, the applicant will be required to incorporate that percentage of private open space that they have on the ground floor within the building facade, meeting the requirements for the private open space definition. So there are a couple items that require DAC approval, one being special review compliance. This project is required for special review due to its lot size, request for variances, and request to utilize TDRs. Staff has found that the request meets the requirements of Section 9454B2, and specifically for subsection A, the relationship of the building to the site and surroundings. Staff has found that the building is within the permitted height. It's also within a transition zone between the historical Clematis Street buildings and the zoning districts that permit taller structures. So the structures along Clematis Street are within the Clematis Street Conservation District, which is intended to preserve the character and scale of these existing buildings. So this is transitioning into the Broadstone, which is the approximately same height. The areas to the east are also permitted to be 10 stories, although that structure is eligible for historic designation, so it may never build that high. It's also compatible with surrounding uses. It introduces new active uses to a currently underutilized lot, or a parking lot, which really serves very little in terms of it's not considered active use, and it does not do much for people walking by it other than looking at a parking lot. One recommendation that we have that Brian has already mentioned, we did want the applicant to reduce the size of the drop-off canopy area from 30 feet to 22 feet. This was to accommodate a canopy tree every 30 feet as required by code. So the area highlighted in yellow, this was from the original plan that was in your packet, was approximately 30 feet for the drop-off area. And the trees that are highlighted here in green were about, I think it was 45 feet, yes. So with this, we can now accommodate those trees every 30 feet. An additional recommendation is that the applicant shall not fence or wall off the bistro outdoor seating area along De Torres Street. In one of the submittals, there was a low wall around it, and as this is considered an extension of the public open space, we do not want them to wall that off. So it serves as a feeling that it's an extension of the public realm. In regards to the canopy, this was a condition that came from the Historic Preservation Division. I have Frederick Mittner here who can talk more about this. So this concrete canopy is from the 1960s. We have been working with the applicant, as Brian said. This solution was the one that was presented in the DAC packets, and we were very happy with this, to see this as the solution. We are recommending that we still work with them to find a solution to preserve it on site with the relocation as an alternative solution. Understanding that there's some concerns with the parking, there may be some flexibility where those public parking on the 5 on the alley are, to allow those concrete pillars to be within landscape beds instead of just in the, on the asphalt. That would allow for some better maneuvering for those cars getting in and out of the spaces. So that is something that we're working with them on. An additional recommendation is the inclusion of additional architectural treatment for the proposed stairwell wall on the west elevation, so on Quadrille. Noting that the architecture for this has, it's really is doing a good job screening the parking garage. There is that long expanse of stairwell, which when you're standing by it, can be kind of a harsh blank facade. So we just want to work with them to continue some features on that to break it up. So overall, staff's professional opinion is that the design of the structure and the architectural features that are screening the parking garage is appropriate for the building design. We are recommending that the applicant continue to work with staff on the proposed aluminum panels for the parking garage screening. There wasn't much detail submitted, so we weren't able to really determine the exact material being proposed or the spacing in between. So just in these areas, this is along Quadrille again, we just want to make sure that there's sufficient screening and that it's architecturally appropriate. So that's something that, this is still under site plan review, so that is something that we'll be continuing to work with them on. In terms of subsection B for circulation and traffic flow, generally there is a low level of new net trips due to the use of senior living. The proposed valet operation is proposing a drop-off stacking of 3 cars along Daytona Street to prevent any backup on Daytona Street from cars waiting for that operation. The only garage access is off the alleyway, so there's no curb cuts proposed on any of the street frontages, which is less of a pedestrian impact. This is a picture of Daytona Street on this current lot, and this is the existing curb cut. And they really impact pedestrian travel. As you're walking along the facade, you have to look out for cars, and you know, it's not as nice of an experience for pedestrians walking. So that's definite upgrade to this site. In terms of C and D, building design and public realm, staff finds that the project meets objective 3.2 of goal 3 of the DMP element, which states that the city shall promote an enhanced architectural design quality for all downtown development. Staff finds that the continuation of the architectural features along the parking garage facade does provide an appearance of active use. And this is just highlighting along Daytona Street. This is actually the parking garage, but it's a continuation of the architectural treatment that's around the entire building facade. And in the enhancement of the public realm with both the active use and the public open space along Dixie Highway. Brian mentioned the bus shelter, so I won't go into it too much. Staff did work with the applicant and PalmTran. PalmTran has agreed to utilize that bus shelter. The condition for the backing, the aluminum panel, actually came from PalmTran, not from city staff, and that's to help with rain and protecting the people that are sitting in there. PalmTran doesn't have specific standards on the architectural treatment of that, so staff is working to make sure that this is a perforated aluminum decorative panel, because there are certain materials that PalmTran won't accept, like glass and plastic, because it's too, it'll absorb the heat and be too hot. PalmTran also doesn't want a bicycle rack installed at this location. Broadstone was notified and is agreeable to this. And that's what I said. So going into the variance request for the active use liner along Daytona Street and Quadrille Boulevard, the variance along Daytona is a 9% variance for active use liner, and it is a 100% variance along Quadrille Boulevard. And the conditional setback, which is only for the 4th floor, which in the plans it did note 3rd and 4th floor, but it's only for the 4th floor. And the staff report was correct in mentioning it was only the 4th floor. Along Daytona Street, the variance of 13 feet 9 inches, and Quadrille Boulevard of 12 feet 3 inches. So staff analyzed and found the applicant does meet the required variance criteria of section 9438D6. Specifically, that a circumstance peculiar to the land exists and the special condition is not a result of the applicant. This is a very, the narrow lot, the lot depth does not permit a parking garage to be built in an efficient manner. If it was built to meet the required conditional setback and active use liners, it would be an inefficient parking garage layout. Additional floors would be needed and additional height and width dedicated to just parking garage use, which can be detrimental to the public realm. So staff found that the variance requested does help keep the dedicated parking garage stories to a minimum. In terms of the Class B special use, staff found the applicant meets the required Class B special use criteria for a Type 3 group home to meet the criteria of Section 94-273-2. Specifically, the proposed development will be in harmony with the general character and have no detrimental effect on general welfare of the area. It is essentially a residential use, which is generally permitted in the area with a lower traffic impact, and again, introducing active uses to a lot that has no active use, and reduce curb cuts and improve the pedestrian realm. One variance request, as noted by Mr. Terry, is the distance requirement. So in the code, DAC can grant a variance from a requirement for special use. In the specific requirements for group homes, there is a requirement for a 1,200-foot distance separation between group homes of this nature. So within that 1,200 feet is the Lourdes Noreen McKean Assisted Living on South Flagler and the Colonial Assisted Living on the corner of Datora and Rosemary. Staff supports this due to the following reasons. It is a more dense downtown. This is the same regulation that applies to the entire city. It's a denser downtown, so there's a higher chance that these facilities will be within that distance requirement. Also, this proposal is within a different area of the downtown, and it can attract different residents who want to be closer to the actual center and to Clematis Street. And this will encourage aging in place and the ability for the older population to be able to walk to, CVS or any businesses that they may need to get to. So overall, this staff's professional opinion is that the proposed project will substantially improve an area of the downtown which currently serves as a surface parking lot. The requested special use and all of the requested variances will not negatively impact the downtown and will support construction of a new project that will overall benefit the public realm. And with that, regarding so there's a couple different motions I have to go through because this is a multi-level case, but in terms of the special review, staff found that the special review satisfies all of the criteria and recommends approval with the following conditions. One, the decreasing of the width of the drop-off canopy, which we have already discussed. The applicant not fencing off the bistro outdoor seating area. Recommending the preservation of concrete canopy on site, as illustrated on the submitted plans for DAC review, with the relocation as an alternative solution. Installing an aluminum screen on the bus shelter on Broadstone property, or paying money, which engineering has said that they can pay money in lieu of that, of the requested modifications to the Broadstone shelter. Relocating, this is the condition that Mr. Terry stated about how this condition reads, that the applicant shall relocate the existing traffic light pole boxes into a landscape area and screen all other utilities on site. Understanding what they're saying, so the traffic light pole boxes, it was noticed that they have not been addressed on the civil plans or the landscape plans, so we do not know exactly where they are. So again, this has not been approved for site plan review yet, so we have time to work this out. But what we want to make sure of is that these boxes are not in the middle of the sidewalk or the plaza. So this could perhaps be reworded as that we work to incorporate these into the landscape beds or however we may address this of some type, that in the case that it needs to be relocated, they have to do it, but that there may be an alternative solution. Coordinate with city engineering and adjust a tourist street design if necessary. So currently the city engineering department, I believe, has either hired or is in the process of hiring someone for Detour Street, but it has not been, there's no plans or anything yet, so it may not impact this property, but it's a condition that we wanted to include it in case that affected them. And then they would just have to design that to meet what else is happening along the remainder of Detour Street. The final design of infiltration system under the plaza is subject to final engineering review during engineering permit. If any major changes should occur, either further DAC review or some further review may be required. This is in regards to the text amendment for the incorporation of private open space. Again, they would have to come back and redesign that private open space if that code amendment didn't pass. The working with the proposed aluminum screening on the garage, and then the trash compactor room shall be designed to have interior width of 32 feet 6 inches by 9 per requirements of restrictive covenant. So for the variances, staff does recommend approval for all of the requested variances. And for the Class B special use and for the variance, staff does recommend approval with the listed following conditions, which are directly out of the code for group homes, and just states that they need the appropriate state licenses, and that in the future, if they ever want to change from group home to bona fide dwelling units, they would have to meet whatever requirements of the code that would trigger. And with that, it was a long case, so thank you. And that completes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Levesque. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak on this case? I don't think I have any cards here, but is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak? Oh, Mr. Clemente.
Good morning. I put a card in, but quite late. Good morning, everyone. Rafael Clemente, Executive Director of the Downtown Development Authority. Am I done already? I'd like to speak in support of this project. I had the opportunity to meet with the applicant early on, a couple of months back, and want to, in particular, commend them for the work they did with city staff to accommodate sanitation on property. If you pay attention to the challenges we're facing in a growing downtown district, that is a really big step forward, and I think could be a model for other development projects in downtown. And also just speak to the variance in the distance requirement. You know, as our population grows, we're approaching 10,000 people in downtown. Many of them younger, but those folks also have parents and grandparents, and having the ability to have those loved ones right in your neighborhood is not only a benefit to our residents, the younger residents here, but also to those older people who want to be close to their families. It's really, really important for quality of life. And as I tell my children, when mommy and I are really old, please don't send us to the suburbs. We want to live somewhere in downtown. So I urge you to approve this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clemente. Anyone else? No? Okay, seeing no one else, I'd like to turn it to the board for questions and comments.
I have a question about the parking that is internal. I understand there's maybe about 5 parking spaces outside the building, but inside the building structure, there is parking to accommodate the loss of public parking spaces. How inside the building will the public know which spots are designated public, and will they be similarly metered to what is there now?
And just to add on to that, is it like monthly parking or?
Yes, so what was approved through the restrictive covenant is that it'll be managed by city parking administration. There'll be monthly parking passes, and that will be something that will be, that the public can go through the parking administration to get those monthly passes. So it'll be valet operation the same way that the rest of the parking garages. So it won't be the daily parking, it'll be monthly only.
Okay, so if somebody, is there an option for somebody who wants to go to the CVS to use the valet? Is that an option?
That will not be an option, no. They would have to use the 5 on-street parking spaces, which are open to the public. Those will be metered, just the same as other on-street parking spaces. And there's still going to be, I believe, 2 spaces along Dixie Highway retained for the on-street parking spaces as well.
Thank you.
The metered parking you're talking about, is that going to be the short-term 15-minute parking, or is it going to be regular?
I don't believe so. I'd have to, from my knowledge and talking with Ed Davis at Parking Administration, it's just going to be regular metered for as long as you want. They may want to do maybe one space for that, but I can't speak to that. That's something we still have to kind of figure out with them, and same with the monthly passes.
Can we go back to that slide for a second that talks about the parking requirements? The applicant initially said that they are going to utilize or just go with the standard parking requirements on the site, and then made a statement saying they'd go from 50 down to 31. I just want to get some clarification on that.
The 50 to 31 is the public parking spaces. That was part of the restrictive covenant. What Mr. Terry was talking about for the regular parking spaces was what's required for the development itself.
And that was reduced because they're incorporating the garbage within the building.
Yes, the public parking spaces was reduced. It was offset by the construction and design of that air-conditioned public or trash room for the tenants at Clematis Street. Mm-hmm.
That's the only question I had on that. Thank you.
I'd like to get some more information about the relocation of that canopy. What's the historical importance of that, and so on?
I will direct to Frederique Mittner.
Hi, good morning. Frederique Mittner, City Historic Preservation Planner. The canopy was built in 1968/69 as part of what was happening all around the country with downtowns demolishing buildings and building parking spaces. And so it really reflects that era. And we felt it was a very easy ask. They were not losing any square footage for this. Actually, it would provide a shaded parking area off the alley, which I think we all hunt for those coveted shaded spots down in South Florida. And so because, again, it was an easy ask and preserving some of the authenticity of our downtown and the evolution of our downtown, we believe it's important to keep it on site. We do understand there may be a reason that it has to go off site, but we're hoping that it would still be in an appropriate context.
If it has to go off site, where would it go?
We've been in discussions possibly of a city public right-of-way near the Bright Line because it does have a similar architectural style to that geometric form there.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Angus?
Hey, Mr. Chair, this is a question for, I guess it's for the applicant. Staff's asking for the reduction in the canopy from 30 feet to 22 feet. Are you guys okay with that? I mean, architecturally, how it was presented, the canopy, matches the vertical element in the building, and now it's going to be reduced. Our graphics didn't have your updated graphic,
Right.
which, is that okay with the 22 feet wide, or is that something that kind of messes with the feel of the building? The reason why I'm asking is because we're dealing with a senior living facility, and I understand the trees at 30 feet, is an important element in the urban fabric, but the pickup drop-off area for seniors, wide, cover them in inclement weather, it makes a lot of sense. And right now, how it's presented, it reads really well with the horizontal, piers that come out. It matches that. I just didn't know if that was something that you guys were okay with.
We originally, of course, requested the 30 feet to be able to match that kind and register with those lines of that very important entrance element. We were willing to concede to the 22 feet if need be, but we'd greatly prefer to keep the 30-foot wide canopy for what you aforementioned of the assisted living facility.
Maybe there's a balance.
Exactly. And I'm sorry, my name is Alexia Veru from MSA Architects.
Thanks. Actually, you can stay right there. You folks are working with staff on the treatment of the stairwell number 3 facade. Do you think scoring, just simple scoring, might get you there? Staff, MSA?
The only area that we particularly have scoring on the building is when we introduce a different painted element. So we left the stairwell as a very blank component for the blade signage, which could really add a lot of gesturing to the building on the side.
So is there a potential solution to that?
Right now, we have the signage for now, which could be much more decorated if need be, but that's what we've come up with so far.
And we're giving you a variance for the garage levels to be closer to the street. I'm wondering, and and this is where your updated graphics and what you're showing in the reports. I saw one graphic, I think it was exhibit figure 7 in our report, which had nothing in it, and then the original flat elevations had mesh, kind of a heavy mesh. And then I think Mr. Terry showed today, you guys carried the muntins or mullions down from the windows. Are you going in that direction? Because I think architecturally, it needs to lighten up because that mesh just, it doesn't
Exactly.
look
For
like a
right
prison.
now, we've removed the mesh from the garage screening to introduce it as only open aluminum frames, matching with the mullion pattern and muntin pattern of the other windows to
Right.
give that same effect.
How is the trash area going to be accessed by the other tenants on Clematis, the ones that will be giving up their dumpsters?
I just wanted to make one statement about the stairwell first, is that in our code, we specifically have that signage cannot be counted towards architectural treatment, so I did want to say that. But it'll be access controlled by some sort of swipe card that will activate the rolling door, and it for the actual tenants, it probably doesn't have to go up the full way. It can be operated so it only raises 6 feet or so.
Great, thank you. Sorry, one more thing. I wanted to commend the applicant for coming up, and trying to find a way to, preserve that architectural element on site. It looks like they came up with a pretty good solution, and hopefully it can stay on site. But it's good that the city has potential other options because there's obviously other places in the city where it would equally work in close proximity. Thanks. Great looking project.
Great. So I just had a few questions as well. I think my first one was answered in terms of that public parking component, if it was daily, but I hear it's monthly. And so could you talk about how that works in terms of who gets to pick that, who gets to be made aware? Is there like a lottery or something for the city that they can go in and get those spaces? And how would that actually physically work or practically work?
I believe there's a waiting list or the list that the parking administration keeps for monthly parking passes. It's a separate department and they have their own operational, so I'm not completely, it's not exactly, I don't know exactly how it works. I just know that they have a list of people that, that come seeking those monthly passes, and they talk to the parking administration, and they work it out within that department.
So there's monthly passes for the other city parking garages in the city and waiting lists? Is
Yes.
that?
Mhm.
Okay, great. And then the other comment was with regard to the 5 parking spaces that would be on the street. It seems like, I think it was mentioned as can somebody go in there and have a short-term parking for going to CVS or something? That seems like a good idea to me because I can see how, those spaces could just be gobbled up and somebody will park there all day and not be available for its intended use, which I think is probably short-term, go get something to eat, pick up at CVS. So I would encourage exploring that from a functional standpoint. I want to talk about the streetscape a little bit. I was looking at the drawings and I noticed I think the concrete sidewalk is the finish for most of the sidewalk, but then I also saw a detail about pavers that would be sort of in a contextual fashion around the street trees. Is that the detail? Is a landscape architect here to talk to that?
Yeah, maybe you go slide.
Yes.
It's like a zone around.
Moved it too fast, it's frozen.
It was in the documents.
Oh, we're close.
I didn't see it in the presentation, but in the submitted plans, I think there was a graphic that showed a herringbone pattern and it said pavers, but not necessarily that pattern.
Around the street trees? Yes, we're saying that's a, Hugh Johnson from AAL, landscape architect for the project. Those are paver grates.
Could you speak into the mic a little bit more?
Yes, those, where you see that around the street trees, those are, rather than tree grates, they're paver grates. That take the same hardscape material that's used in the plazas and around the building and in areas of interest in pedestrian plazas, and incorporates that same material around the pavers rather than a tree grate. What this does is creates continuity throughout the project, but it also creates more of a walk surface rather than a planted area or a tree grate. And it doesn't have the problems that tree grates will later buckle and prevent. And we worked very closely with Ray Carnucci to put structural soil under those areas so we won't have buckling problems in the future.
So is this a system where the pavers are floating on top and then there's like an airspace between that and the soil?
And a grate that supports those below.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. And the concrete is gray, broom swept, finished concrete, similar to the city standards?
Correct.
Great, thank you.
Okay, you bet.
My other comment was on the architecture. It seemed like there's brown or black windows in the rendering. Is that the actual finish that would be perceived?
Yes, the windows have a black iron ore, muntin, and mullion finish to match the rest of the aesthetic of the building and detailing.
And the glazing too? It seemed like the whole window was sort of dark or sort of brown or
The
black.
window, the glazing is going to be obviously, of course, a clear, but not too much of a darker tint as seen, but it's just for the aesthetic of the color elevations.
Okay, great. And then my last comment is about the utility screening condition. You know, it's always challenging because you have utility owners that have restrictions, and when you have a condition that says they shall be screened, but then the utilities don't get turned on because of this, that, or the other. So I didn't notice in the drawings, but are there any external utilities mounted on the building that would require heavy screening, or are they all internal to the building and really won't need heavy landscaping to screen them?
So far, the only screen that we do have for utilities are going to be two louvers, the two intake louvers for the generator room alongside the quadrille elevation towards the north end.
And there.
I'm sorry, yes.
There's one FDC that's mounted to the building. Another was shown in a landscape bed at one point. I think we're still working out if that needs to be in the landscape bed, or, yeah, was that moved? Okay, so we're still working on that. There was the second, and it was shown in the landscape bed, but we want to see if that can also be wall-mounted as well. And there is the backflow preventers being shown within a landscape bed right now. So we understand that when utilities come in, that, you know, there are certain restrictions that we have to work with them on. I think the city is generally getting better, we're working together more so that when these things are installed, the Public Works Department or the Engineering Department works with us now, and so we can address that before things get put in. You know, understanding that there's certain areas that we may not be able to get as much screening as the zoning perspective wants.
And is it known where the FPL transformers and switch cabinets would be? Are those internal to the building, or is FPL going to pick a spot that is going to be problematic?
The FPL vault is internal to the building and accessible through the alley.
Great, thank you. Well, I appreciate it. Great presentation, great graphics. Thank you so much to the applicant for producing those. It's very easy to see the context and the detail, so great job.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
To staff, does the applicant and staff want to modify condition E of the special review to loosen up the shall requirement to, you know, may be required, and then add some language to that herein, or
That is for the,
granting the special review condition E?
For the relocating of the light
Correct.
pole boxes?
Yeah.
Yes, I think that we can modify it to say that, ongoing, we are working with the staff, that the applicant will work with staff to incorporate light pole boxes into landscape areas, or alternatively, we can say that it's not within the sidewalk or plaza area, but, shall be relocated if necessary. I think we still need to include language that if we can't find a solution, it will have to be
Right, so
modified.
if we could cover to the word shall and say the applicant may be required to install an aluminum screen, go through the whole thing at the end, say based on further analysis, keep it kind of simple, would that work?
Yes.
Mr. Terry?
I would propose something a little more strict than that, because based on further analysis is a little ambiguous in my view. I would just say to add language that, which I think we all agree, it won't impact the pedestrian flow, it won't be located in the sidewalk.
Sure.
Something to that effect.
That's why we're discussing it.
I think we can work with it. We'll work with staff as we continue.
I concur.
Great. With that, can I have a motion?
Motion to approve?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Motion to approve, granting another special review. I move that the Downtown Action Committee approve the special review for DAC case number 1911 as listed in the staff report dated December 11th, 2019. The following conditions are recommended. A, the applicant shall decrease the width of the drop-off area canopy to 22 feet, size of the parallel parking space to accommodate a shade tree every 30 feet, and meet code requirements. B, the applicant shall not fence or wall off the bistro outdoor seating area along Datura Street as it is treated as public open space. C, staff recommends the preservation of the concrete canopy on site as illustrated on the submitted plans for DAC review with the relocation as an alternative solution. D, the applicant shall install an aluminum screen on the bus shelter located on Broadstone property or pay money in lieu of per city engineering requirements to replace the existing bus shelter adjacent to the property. E, and shall I read it modified?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to need your help, Brad. The applicant may be required to relocate the existing traffic light pole boxes into a landscape area and screen all other utilities on site, working with staff
To ensure
uh,
that the traffic light pole boxes will not impede pedestrian traffic or be located in the sidewalk area.
Okay.
Does that accomplish it? Is there another location?
Right.
I think so.
F, the applicant shall coordinate with city engineering during the construction phase and adjust the Deter Street design if necessary to meet any redesign plans for the street. G, the final design of the infiltration system and the impact on the plaza design is subject to final engineering review. If any major changes should occur that require redesign of the public plaza, further DAC review may be required. H, the final approval for the text amendment that would permit the incorporation of the required private open space percentage on the ground level to be treated as an extension of the public open space is subject to approval by the City Commission. In the case that the text amendment is not approved, the applicant shall be required to incorporate the remaining required private open space into the building design as required by private open space definitions. I, the applicant shall continue to work with city staff to ensure that the proposed aluminum screening on the garage will match the proposed aesthetic of the architecture. J, the trash compactor room shall be designed to have an interior width of 32 feet 6 inches by 9 feet per the requirements of the restrictive covenant approved by City Commission on December 2nd, 2019. The motion is based upon a determination that the testimony presented at this hearing along with the application submitted constitute a preponderance of competent substantial evidence. The board hereby makes findings of fact that the special review requested satisfies all of the criteria of the City of West Palm Beach zoning and land development regulations, Article 2, Section 94-52B2.
Just prior to the vote, really quick, I wanted to ask, because you did talk about the condition for the condition number 1 for the decreasing of the drop-off canopy. Are you keeping that, or did you?
They don't seem to push back too hard.
Okay.
So we'll just keep it the way it is.
Okay.
I think you recommend, if I could speak?
Yeah.
I mean, I think your recommendation is correct, and I think that our architect agrees that that is, from the aesthetic, is the appropriate width. And, you know, we were willing to move it to 22 feet. I think that we all saw the elevations, quite honestly, for the very first time today with the reduced width. And I mean, I think our sentiment is similar to what you expressed, that it looks better at the 30. So if we can modify that condition and let it remain at 30 feet, we would certainly appreciate that.
What's staff saying?
Or we can, again, word it as more of a further analysis, come to a, you know, because he is correct. I mean, we had not seen the updated elevations with that 22 canopy. I had not seen it until his presentation, so we could modify it to something, you know, further analysis or continue to work, something along those lines.
If we modified it, would we need some other variance for the 45-foot spacing between the trees, which is supposed to be 30?
30-foot space.
I don't believe that. No variance. But I would like to keep it as a continue to work, just because our landscape planner is not here, and I just want to make sure that he's comfortable with that distance, because he knew us going into it. He knew that we were modifying
Still
this.
working on it?
Yeah.
How do I modify that condition A? Just make the modification.
I'm in agreement that 30 would look better. Let's look at it.
Can I just modify A of the condition as?
Yes, the motion hasn't been seconded yet, so
Okay.
we can continue.
So we're going to look to modify A of the condition to the applicant shall continue to work with staff to arrive at a appropriate width for the canopy.
I think that works. Mm-hmm.
Let's just keep it simple.
Mm-hmm.
Can I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, hearing the motion in a second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Hearing none, unanimously passes. On that. Special review. Now we'll move to the granting of the variance.
Correct.
Motion to approve?
Do I hear a second?
Second.
We don't have to read this one.
You should read, at least say you move to approve DAC case 1911, items number 1 through 4 listed in the staff report, and then read the paragraph below it.
Okay. Granting the variance, I move that Downtown Action Committee approve DAC case number 1911. And then the paragraph below.
Conditions 1 through 4.
1, a variance request from CLDR Table 4-24 to reduce the minimum required active use liner for a primary pedestrian street from 60% to 51%. 2, a variance request from ZLDR Table 4-24 to reduce the minimum required active use liner for an avenue from 60% to 0%. 3, a variance request from ZLDR Table 4-24 to reduce the minimum conditional required setback along a primary pedestrian street from 31 feet to 17 feet 3 inches. 4, a variance request from ZLDR Table 4-24 to reduce the minimum conditional required setback along an avenue from 31 feet to 18 feet 9 inches. This variance approval is made conditional upon restrictions, stipulations, and/or safeguards listed in the Planning Division staff report dated December 11, 2019, that I move are necessary to ensure compliance with the purpose and intent of the zoning code and consistent with the downtown master plan and the comprehensive plan of the city of West Palm Beach. This motion is based upon the testimony presented along with the application submitted, which constitutes competent substantial evidence that the standards in section 94-38D6 have been met.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Granting the variance passes unanimously. Next is granting a Class B special use.
Motion to approve.
Keep reading.
I move that the Downtown Action Committee approve DAC case number 1911 for the Class B special use of Group Home Type 3 with a variance for the distance requirement with the following conditions. 1, prior to the issuance of an occupational license or building permit, whichever occurs first, evidence shall be provided that appropriate approvals or licenses from county, state, or federal regulatory agencies have been obtained for the group home. 2, in the event all or a portion of a group home consists of bona fide dwelling units rather than sleeping quarters without personal care or service normally provided by licensed adult congregate living facilities, then the regulations of the applicable zoning district shall apply. The motion is based upon a determination that testimony presented at this hearing, along with the application submitted, constitute a preponderance of competent substantial evidence. The board hereby makes findings of fact that the special review requested satisfies all of the criteria of the City of West Palm Beach Zoning and Land Development Regulations, Article 2, Section 94-2732 and 94-273D28.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Granting a Class B special use passes. Congratulations.
They still have the TDRs.
The next case is TDR case number 19-07.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Lauren Thomas with Touchstone Web Realty. On behalf of ZF Development for the DAC approval of the transfer of 27-125, a change on the agenda, square feet of TDRs from the properties at 604 8th Street.
Could you also lower your mic and just talk in the mic a little
Yes,
bit? Thank
sorry.
you.
821 North Rosemary Avenue, 800 Henrietta Avenue, 601 7th Street, to the property at receiving site 401 Datura Street. Receiving site 401 Datura Street, 87-125 TDRs. That is a agenda discrepancy of the 27-119 TDRs. Sending site is 604 8th Street, 821 North Rosemary Avenue, 800 Henrietta Avenue, and 601 7th Street, also known as Heart and Soul. This was approved by CRA on December 2nd as well. And then a picture showing the transfer of the Heart and Soul site to 400 Datura Street, the receiving site. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll hear from staff.
Okay. My presentation is very short. Just really quick. The receiving site is within Clematis Waterfront District 10 to 12, which can go to a max 3.5 FAR and a max of 12 stories with a TDR transfer. The sending site is an urban open space within the Northwest District. One requirement is that before the transfer of TDRs, the urban open space must meet the requirements of Section 94-109, which essentially means it must be completed as an active recreation area prior to the receiving site receiving a TDR certificate. After the transfer, the Heart and Soul Park will have 3,237 square feet of remaining TDRs to transfer. And with that, staff does recommend approval for the TDR case. There is a minor correction between what was listed in the agenda of 27,119 square feet to what's listed in the staff report of 27,125. That was a discrepancy between what was shown on the site plan data table in the site plan and what was then calculated by the survey. And that is all. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak on this case? No. Seeing none, can I hear a motion?
Motion to approve. I move that Downtown Action Committee approve the transfer of development rights DAC case number TDR 1907 as listed in the staff report dated December 11, 2019 as follows. A, the transfer of 27,125 square feet of TDRs from the properties at 604 8th Street, 821 North Rosemary Avenue, 800 Henrietta Avenue, and 601 7th Street to the property at 401 Datura Street pursuant to the requirements of Section 94-132 and Section 94-133. Subject to the following condition. 1, all requirements for urban open space sending site as required by Section 94-132C4 and Section 94-109 must be substantially completed prior to the issuance of a TDR certificate.
Thank you. Can I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Case passes. Granting of transfer of development rights.
Congratulations.
Okay, at this time, as mentioned earlier, I have a voting conflict in the next case and will be recusing myself. Chairman Pro Tem, Mr. Stephen Graham, will be taking the chairman position.
Like, before they start.
Should we take a 5-minute bathroom break before we go into this one? Sure.
Go ahead, Stacey. I believe we just want to take a brief 5-minute break before we start this item. All right, we'll reconvene at 10:27.